we need to talk. I have a serious problem with playing sun chunks. Actually, I have a lot of little problems, but the first main one, of course, is burnout. I've experienced this a few times over the lifespan of the account already. The first little taste was around episode 5/6, when I spent 3 months playing pseudo UIM, chiseling bones for 43 crafting. Then there were the real dark ages around episode 13, when I was stuck world hopping for crafting and smithing. Yeah, I do know I played leagues as well during this time, but there was an entire 7-month gap between chunks. Honestly, I think it was a miracle I even managed to complete that one, and that was after lowering the smithing grind from 88 down to 70. Then most recently, of course, there's the Huey grind, and that was the straw that I think finally broke the sun chunks back. On paper, not that bad sounding of a grind. In reality though, one of the most mind-numbing grinds I have ever attempted. The big asterisk here though is that all these Huey problems are really caused by the rune mace. I don't think this task would actually be a problem at all with a real weapon, but that's just the nature of playing a one-chunk account. Anyways, I ended up backlogging the wand / making it passive so I didn't quit playing for real this time, but we'll go back to that shortly. Moving on, what is next? Well, with the release of Varlamore Part 3, I'm faced with a whole heap of new / reoccurring problems. So, first issue is that we now have a direct land connection to Corinth from the bottom side, which practically guarantees I roll Chambers of Xeric before the rest of the continent. And for a long time, this was actually a major concern for me, until I recently found out you can't actually go through the cave without having visited the other side first, which at this point in the account would be an exception to basically cross the entire map. Speaking of exceptions though, I guess I should talk about the initial thought of becoming a Zeah only one chunk account, which according to this poll, most of you are actually completely on board with. But this route has its own set of problems, and the biggest concern for me actually is the somewhat large list of exceptions, which are X marks the spot, a hard requirement for most of the Corinth quest, gives me stackable clues as a side effect, which is a pretty major deal, and I would definitely feel pretty cheaty about this exception considering the amount of time and effort I've already put into juggling easy clues in the past. Next up is Rune Mysteries. Not technically required for rune crafting in Zeah since you can do the library for books, but that's pretty bad and so far away that I would consider this a hard required exception in order to at least lamp the skill. Then we have Druidic Ritual. Unfortunately, actually a hard requirement for Corinth quests. Herblore would be very nice to have, but also very scary, since it opens up the door for mastering mixology and an immediate grind to like 75 plus or something, without any supplies or good access to vials or anything. It'd actually be pretty bad. Last but not least, we have Eagle's Peak, which is needed for Red Chins and the Hunter's Guild quest, which unlocks basically just Master Tier Rumors. However, since I'm already blocked out of Rumors until Dark Kebits, I would consider this one to actually be skippable, to be honest. There are also plenty of problematic grinds going this route, the most notable one of course being Yama, without having a good weapon still, much less having any form of Demon Bane outside of manually casting Arceus spells. And speaking of Demon Bane, let's circle back to the Varlamore chunks, the Final Dawn. First of all, can't actually complete it without runecrafting exception, but even if I did, the Delve boss actually has a hard Demon Bane requirement for Wave 3 onwards, which is where all the uniques are found. Does this mean I should add yet another exception for a Silverlight / Darklight? I don't think so. This is a pretty hefty list of exceptions to be making at this point in the account, and the short answer is I don't think Zeah locking is actually the solution to my problem. And if anything, I think it would just add a lot more problems. Exceptions aside though, there's some pretty nasty unlocks in the new chunks, like the sawmill that finally unlocks valid construction training, which, just to clarify really quick, both pets and skill capes have always been a sort of case-by-case basis for me since I'm not a 100% full-on extreme one chunk. My opinion on it is basically some are far too easy, some are really just unrealistic. Some capes I would probably just do because of their benefit or how easy I could grind it out. Say like the ranging cape, I have 400,000 arrows left to fire, so I'd probably do that. Back to the sawmill. This would basically mean getting, I think, 88 construction off oak log chopping and teleporting back and forth from my house to make larders. So doable, but not an ideal situation I want to end up in, especially not right after my like 4th major consecutive woodcutting grind. Then we also have the rare drop table and visage grind from Brutal Blue Dragons down in the ruins of Teriyaki Sauce, non-safe spottable, hit like a truck even through Mage Prayer, and it would require 3 very, very rare drops. This is a grind that I initially barely avoided by 1 agility level due to the Aldrin shortcut requiring the quest, but with these new shortcuts over here in Nemus Retreat, this grind is now 100% on the table due to my previous lamping. And this made me finally realize, I think no matter what direction I go in, I will end up either making more arbitrary exceptions to keep going that I don't really want to make, or end up in a grind that will 100% cause me to quit playing and making the series. Thankfully, there is a magical solution to these problems, and that's called not doing those tasks. Okay, that sounds like literal heresy for a onechunk account, but hear me out real quick. Thanks to a little plagiarism from Blue OSRS and their unique onechunk series gimmick, pause the video and go to subscribe to them right now. I can wait. Okay, enough waiting. Introducing my very own easy to understand task blocking system. I will be a little generous with my blocking system, but basically if I have an empty slot, I can backlog any source of a task. And if you don't know what that means exactly, here's a perfect Varlamore relevant example, a Moxleyotl. If this were on the block list, the only thing it would actually backlog are effectively the combat achievements, because all of its unique drops are actually also dropped by other monsters within the dungeon. So let's say for some reason I really didn't want to have to grind out a pendant of 8s. I could technically block it, but that would require 2 slots because 1 to block a Moxleyotl and 1 to block the Frost Nogwoods. Hopefully you are following along. Here's a skilling example, the Sawmill. I could block the Sawmill in the Auburn Vale and then effectively remove my entire construction grind in the future, but if I were to roll a second Sawmill, then I would be forced to either use a second block slot or take it off and have to do the grind regardless. For chunks that have multiple objects or NPCs of the same variety, I will allow those to be blocked as using 1 slot, but if I unlock a second chunk that contains them, well, that will require a second slot or potentially be unblockable entirely. An example of this are the future brutal blue dragons that I mentioned earlier. These are technically 5 spawns in that chunk. I can block those in general as a source with just the 1 slot, which would block the rare drop table / visage. But if I were to roll another chunk containing brutal blue dragons or the visage drop or a chunk with the rare drop table, blocking that would either no longer work or just be less effective basically. So I guess that just leaves the question, how many slots will I have exactly? For now, I'm going with a block list that has 7 total slots, just like the Slayer one. 1 for free, the next 4 at 25 million total XP milestones, and the last 2 at 50 million XP milestones. I did it this way since I already have a ton of chunks rolled anyways, and at this point, pretty much any form of unlock requirement is arbitrary anyways, but this gives me a total of 5 slots to work with immediately, and 2 for me to unlock later on. I thought about having really specific requirements like first 99 cape, first green clog, first CA tier completion, first full diary or something, stuff like that, but half of those would probably just happen before the XP requirements anyways. I guess it's a little bit hard when you're 3,500 hours into an account, I guess. Alright, so let's go over what this block list is actually going to currently look like. Slot number 1, Dragon Hunter wand by blocking Huey. Pretty self-explanatory. I'm super dry and sick of killing this boss, and this is what I was going to do either way. Slot number 2, 95 fletching by blocking the dragon dart tips. Since I was already doing this as a sort of passive, not hard required to leave task, it can just go on the block list until I finish it later. Slot number 3, 87 magic. This was the other grind caused by unlocking Puro that I lowered since I was not going to world hop even more runes. But since I'm introducing the block list, I think it's only fair that it goes on here. Slots number 4 and 5 are remaining empty since I have no other tasks left. Like I said earlier, pets and skilling capes are on a case-by-case basis, but not actually required. And in the case of the Huey pets, even if I did want it to be required, it would be blocked by slot 1 blocking Huey anyhow. That just leaves slots 6 and 7, which are locked until I reach 150 mil and 200 million total XP respectively. Now, before I get asked these questions, farming is staying passive, and I'm not going to change that because literally it is just time spent farming, waiting on crops to grow, getting seeds, waiting on crops to grow, getting seeds, waiting on crops to grow. I think you get the idea. My smithing rule of requiring the ore to be mineable and only for best in slot levels is also staying the same. Basically, smithing skill sucks unless you get one of the 2 minigames. And one-off random skilling pets will still be a free chunk roll because I think that just adds potential to spice up the series. And in total, it's only like 8 extra rolls if I get every single skilling pet. which, let's face it, that's probably not going to happen. I mean, I already have 1 of 8, so maybe I'll get the next 7, but unlikely. Also, just to clarify, I'm not limiting when I can add tasks to this block list. I don't want to do it willy-nilly, but they can only come off of the list once completed. This means that basically I will always end up with a bad task I have to complete, just the least bad one out of all of the block slots. Now, one major flaw to this blocking system that I want to address personally is regarding what I consider to be pinnacle content. The 3 raids, the Colosseum, and of course the Inferno. I think it's pretty safe to say that at a point, 5 out of 7 of my slots will just be taken up by these pieces of content. So I am going to introduce an additional special band-aid rule. Any piece of content that I cannot realistically or reliably complete solo is free to be backlogged, not counted towards this block list, or made passive with unique rulings to be determined as I encounter them. This is going to remain a bit generic and vague, but should save me if/when I roll a piece of content that I either need a team to carry me through, or let's face it, like in the case of the Inferno, I won't be able to do that with the gear that I have. If you wanted to see somebody do the Inferno like a madman in a chunk account, go watch Telecon instead. So now we're just left with the final elephant in the room. What am I going to do about leaving Varlamore and of course the Colosseum? Well, as I've learned recently, without making any exceptions, I only have 2 ways out of Varlamore, and that is through either the charter ships or the Quetzal. So I will be completing every single chunk that's left in Varlamore, up to the line up here at Custodia Pass, including part of / most of / whatever I can manage to complete in the Colosseum, and then I will be rolling outwards with any valid 2-way connection. This brings me 2 major benefits. Number 1, I will have the ability to come back to Varlamore and already have the chunks unlocked to complete Moons, Final Dawn, have the Doom boss for later, etc. I mean, I'm already 90% done with the region as it is, so I may as well. And the second major benefit is that if I roll the Quetzal out to Varrock, I'll still be allowed to roll the charter out to, say, Port Sarim afterwards. I know a lot of extremes don't do that if the chunks are technically walkable, but I want to make sure I'm not locking myself out of half the map for years. And again, I think it'll just spice up the series. So to quickly recap, rules are basically staying the same as before, somewhere around semi-extreme-ish, with a fancy new blocking system to free me from the worst offenders so I don't burn out of playing the account. I'm also adding a general band-aid rule that allow me to have solutions for any unrealistic or potential series-stopping content as I come across them. Think Colosseum, Inferno, Raid, etc. I'll also be unlocking and completing the rest of Varlamore first, aside from the block task of course, and beyond that, the whole world will be my oyster. I know that I'm bad at explaining things, and I always seem to forget something, but I think that covers just about everything. I'm aware that this solution is probably considered to be the nuclear approach to some, but really I just want to enjoy playing a one-chunk account without having big walls of RNG suffering or months of AFK grinds around each and every corner. Some people might say I should have just played a vanilla chunker, but the problem with that is I think most of the extreme specific tasks are actually totally valid, even including pets and skilling capes. It kind of just boils down to how and in which order you actually manage to roll the grinds. But like I said earlier, I don't think the blocking system will trivialize the series. I think if anything, it'll just change the order in which I do the worst grinds. And with certain grinds having multiple sources, even being a bit generous with the blocking system like I am, I'll have to do them all eventually regardless. Alright, that's about it. These changes technically go into effect at the end of the next episode or the start-ish of the one after that, but since I haven't made either of those videos yet, I'll just adjust the editing to make it work so it'll be seamless. The reason why I have to do this is because originally I was just sort of passively working on Hewin, moving on, stuck in limbo, but as I learned more and more and ran the numbers so to speak, I decided that the block list was the solution for me. Let me know what you think about these changes in the comments below. Once again, a huge shout out to Blue OSRS since I kind of just yoinked their whole one chunk series gimmick. There's an entire Google document for their series rules if you want to read it, which I probably should have just done something like that for myself, but I block tasks I don't like. Simple as.